You have never touched anything in your life right now. Your hand is resting on something, a table, a phone, your own leg, you can feel it, the pressure, the texture, the warmth. And I'm about to tell you that none of that actually happened, not in the way you think, not even close. I'm Leonard Susskind. I've spent 50 years inside the mathematics of reality. It's quantum mechanics, string theory, the deepest structures of the universe. And after all of it, after all those decades of equations and thought experiments and sleepless nights staring at the blackboard, I keep coming back to one fact that most physicists know, but almost nobody talks about. You have never touched anything, not once, not ever, in your entire life. And the reason why is not some philosophical trick. It's not a word game, it's not metaphor, it's physics. It's hard, unforgiving, experimentally confirmed physics, the kind that runs your GPS satellites, the kind that built the atomic bomb, the kind that has been tested in every particle accelerator on the planet. The reason is that matter is mostly empty space. And what is an empty space is a force field. And you don't touch force fields, you get repelled by them. Stay with me, because once you understand what I'm about to say, you will never look at your own hand the same way again. Let's start with the atom, because that's where this story begins. You learned in school that atoms are like tiny solar systems, electrons orbiting a nucleus the way planets orbit the sun. And neat little spheres of matter stacked together to make everything around you. That picture is wrong. Not slightly wrong, not approximately wrong. It's fundamentally, catastrophically wrong in ways that matter enormously for what I'm about to explain. The first problem is size. If you took a single atom and blew it up to the size of a football stadium, the nucleus would be the size of a marble sitting at the center of the field, a single marble in a stadium. And the electrons, they'd be somewhere in the parking lot, outside, everything in between. Empty space, completely, totally, absolutely empty, no air, no substance, nothing. And the atom you learned about in school, that cozy little ball of matter, is almost entirely nothing. It is a marble in a stadium, surrounded by vast, howling emptiness. Now think about what that means for you. Your body is made of atoms, trillions upon trillions of atoms, and each one of those atoms is almost entirely empty space. So what are you really? You are mostly nothing. You're a pattern, a structure, a set of forces arranged in a particular way that happens to include a brain capable of asking the question. And that's before we get to the really disturbing part, because here's what nobody tells you. Even the parts of the atom that aren't empty space aren't actually solid. The nucleus, the protons and neutrons packed together at the center. They're not little balls of matter either. They're made of quarks. And quarks are not objects with defined edges sitting in a defined location. They are quantum fields, smeared out probabilities, clouds of possibility that only take on definite properties when you interact with them. There is no hard, solid stuff at the bottom of reality. None. The physicists searched for it. We went smaller and smaller atoms, nuclei, protons, quarks, and at every level we found the same thing, not solid matter. And it's not hard little billiard balls of stuff, fields, quantum fields, probability distributions, the ghost of substance without the substance itself. Reality at its deepest level is not made of things. It's made of events and interactions and relationships between quantum fields. Which brings us back to your hand on the table. When your hand approaches the table, what actually happens? Hence, the electrons in the atoms of your hand get close to the electrons in the atoms of the table. Now, electrons are negatively charged, and negative charges repel each other. This electromagnetic force pushes them apart. Your hand never reaches the table. The electrons in your skin and the electrons in the table never make contact. Hence, they get close, and then the electromagnetic force between them pushes back. What you feel as solid, as hard, as real is not contact, it's resistance. It's a force field pushing against another force field. You don't touch the table, you hover invisibly nanometers above it, and the electromagnetic force between your electrons and the table's electrons creates a pressure that your nervous system interprets as touch. There's a gap between you and everything you have ever touched. A gap so small you could never measure it without particle accelerators, but a gap nonetheless. It's an absolute physical, unbridgeable gap. When you shook someone's hand for the first time, when you held your child for the first time, when you embraced someone you loved. Your atoms never met their atoms. Your electrons pushed against their electrons, and the force between those electrons created the sensation you interpreted as connection. You were always separated. It's by physics, by quantum mechanics, by the electromagnetic force itself. Now, I know what happens next. Your brain starts looking for escape routes. Maybe it's just semantics. And maybe touching just means close enough that the force feels real. Maybe the gap doesn't matter. But here's why it matters. Here's why this is not semantics. And because the same force that keeps your hand from touching the table also keeps you from falling through the floor. Think about that. You're not standing on the floor. You're levitating invisibly nanometers above it. The electromagnetic force between the electrons in your feet and the electrons in the floor is pushing back against your weight. Your weight is the gravitational force pulling you down. The electromagnetic force pushing up from the floor is what's holding you in place. You're floating right now as you read this. The solid ground beneath you is not solid in any meaningful sense. It is a force field strong enough to counteract gravity. And you hover above it, suspended by invisible electromagnetic repulsion, and your brain tells you that you're standing. Your entire experience of the physical world, every surface you have ever felt, every object you have ever held, every wall you have ever pushed against, all of it is your nervous system interpreting. It's the electromagnetic force as solidity. None of it involves actual contact between actual pieces of matter. None of it. Now, let me take this one level deeper, because the electromagnetic force is only part of the story. Let's talk about what it actually means to feel something. When the electromagnetic force between your electrons and the table's electrons creates that repulsive pressure, how do you know? How does that invisible interaction between quantum fields become the conscious experience of touching a hard surface? Your nerve endings detect the pressure. Mechanoreceptors in your skin, specialized cells that respond to deformation caused by force. The force bends the cell. The cell sends an electrical signal up your arm, through your spinal cord, into your brain. And your brain constructs from that electrical signal the experience of touch. The experience of touch happens in your brain, not in your hand. There is a hand, there's a table, there's an electromagnetic force between them. And then there's an electrical signal in your nervous system. And then there's a brain constructing an experience of what all of that means. Every step of that chain is real. Every step is physics. But notice what's happening. Reality is making electrical signals. Your brain is interpreting electrical signals as the experience of solidity. And you, the experiencing subject, never have direct access to the underlying reality. You have access to your brain's model of that reality. This is not philosophy, this is neuroscience. Every sensation you have ever had is your brain's interpretation of electrical signals. Light hits your retina. Electrical signals go to your visual cortex. Your brain constructs the experience of seeing air pressure waves hit your eardrum. Electrical signals go to your auditory cortex. Your brain constructs the experience of hearing. You do not perceive reality directly. You perceive your brain's model of reality, and here's the part that should make you very uncomfortable. Your brain's model is optimized for survival, not for accuracy. Evolution did not design your brain to see reality as it is. Evolution designed your brain to react usefully to the signals it receives fast enough, good enough, and useful enough to survive and reproduce. The experience of touching a solid table is extremely useful. It tells you the table can support weight. It tells you the edge is there. Don't lean past it. And it predicts correctly that if you push the table, it will slide. But it is not accurate, not in the deep sense, not at the level of what's actually happening. What's actually happening is that two collections of quantum fields are interacting through the electromagnetic force, and your nervous system is interpreting that interaction in a way that helps you navigate the world. The solidity is a user interface, not reality. The philosopher Donald Hoffman talks about this. He uses the metaphor of your computer desktop. The icons on your screen are not the actual files. The file is not a little yellow folder sitting inside your computer. The yellow folder is an interface, a representation designed to make it easy for you to interact with the underlying reality of bits and transistors and electrical signals. Your perception of the world works the same way. The solid table is an icon. The hard floor is an icon. Everything you've ever touched is your nervous system's icon for an electromagnetic interaction between quantum fields. The underlying reality looks nothing like the icon. Now, So I want to be careful here because I'm not saying the table doesn't exist. I'm not saying reality is an illusion in some mystical sense. The electromagnetic force is real, the quantum fields are real, and the interactions are real, but the solidity, the hardness, the textures that seem so obviously and immediately real, those are constructions. Your brain built them from electrical signals and to help you survive. And once you really understand that, once you let that settle in properly, the natural question becomes, what else is a construction color, for instance? Color does not exist in the world. Electromagnetic radiation exists, light waves of different frequencies exist, but color, the redness of red, the blueness of blue, that's not out there in the world. And that's your visual system's way of encoding the difference between frequencies of light. Other animals have different visual systems. Bees can see ultraviolet. And mantis shrimp have 16 types of color receptors compared to our 3. They live in a world of color complexity we cannot even imagine. And not because the world looks different to them in some superficial way, because their visual system encodes electromagnetic frequencies differently. There's no fact about what color things really are. And there is only what your particular nervous system does with the frequencies it receives. Same with sound, same with smell, same with everything. And the world you experience is the world your nervous system constructs for you, tuned by millions of years of evolution to be useful, not to be accurate. And all of this starts with touch. It's the most basic sense, the one that feels most immediate and undeniable. You have never touched anything. You have never experienced raw reality. And you have experienced your brain's model of electromagnetic interactions between quantum fields, which raises the question I find most fascinating and most disturbing. And so if you've never actually touched anything, have you ever actually been touched? Think about the moments in your life when physical contact meant the most. It's a hand on your shoulder when you were grieving, an embrace from someone you loved, a parent holding you when you were small and the world was large and frightening. And in every one of those moments, there was no contact, there was electromagnetic repulsion between electron clouds, and your nervous system interpreted that repulsion as warmth, as connection, as love. And does that make those moments less real? I don't think so. I've thought about this for a long time, and here's where I've landed. The electromagnetic interaction was real. And the electrical signals in your nervous system were real. The brain state that resulted was real. The emotion that arose from that brain state was real. The experience was real. It's just that reality is deeper, stranger, and more layered than the experience suggested. The experience is a true report about what your nervous system detected. It's not a true report about the raw underlying physics, and I think there's something almost beautiful in that. And the physical universe, through the mechanism of electromagnetic force and nervous systems and brains, learn to experience itself. It's quarks, and electrons arrange themselves into organisms complex enough to feel each other's presence without ever actually touching. The universe is haunted by connection. You reach out, and the forces push back. Your brain turns that repulsion into the sensation of contact. And somehow, from that, you feel that you're not alone. That is extraordinary. And that is physics producing something that physics alone cannot explain. That is matter, becoming aware of matter through the fiction of touch. And let me now go somewhere that will seem tangential, but is actually the heart of everything I've been building toward, quantum mechanics. And because I've been talking about electrons repelling each other through the electromagnetic force, and that's all true. But there's another level, a deeper level, level that makes the you've never touched anything problem even stranger. In quantum mechanics, particles don't have definite positions. They have wave functions, probability distributions. And when an electron is not being measured, it doesn't have a location. And it exists in a superposition of all possible locations, a spread out cloud of probability that collapses to a definite position only when it interacts with something. This is not metaphor. And this is not an approximation. This is what the mathematics says. And the mathematics has been confirmed to more decimal places of accuracy than any other theory in the history of science. And so when your hand approaches the table, what's actually happening is that the wave function of the electrons in your hand is overlapping with the wave function of the electrons in the table. And the electromagnetic force manifests as a change in how those wave functions evolve. The electrons don't touch. They interact through the quantum field, and the result of that interaction is what propagates up your nervous system as the sensation of contact. So you're not a solid object interacting with another solid object. You're a wave function interacting with another wave function. You're a probability distribution reaching toward another probability distribution. And the electromagnetic force between you produces, through the machinery of your nervous system, the experience of solid reality. The solid world is what quantum fields feel like from the inside. That's it. That's the answer. The world feels solid because you're made of the same stuff as the world. And when your quantum fields interact with the quantum fields of the table, the interaction feels like contact, but it's not. It's quantum fields all the way down. Now let me pull back and ask the big question, the one you've probably been forming for the last few minutes. If this is all true, if we've never touched anything, if the solid world is a construction, if reality at its deepest level is quantum fields rather than solid matter, then what does that mean? And what does it mean for how we live? I've sat with this question for a long time, and here's what I think. It means the universe is more interesting than we thought, not less. The naive picture of reality, solid matter bumping into solid matter, is actually the boring picture. It's a picture that leaves no room for mystery. Everything is what it looks like. And contact is contact. Solid is solid. The real picture is richer, stranger, more alive with possibility. You're a pattern of quantum fields. The world around you is a pattern of quantum fields. And the interactions between those patterns, mediated by forces that have no color, no texture, no solidity, produce the entire rich experience of being a conscious creature in a physical world. And the table feels solid because that's what electromagnetic repulsion between electron clouds feels like to a nervous system. And the floor feels hard because that's what the force that prevents you from falling through, it feels like from the inside. And the warmth of another person feels like contact because that's what the electromagnetic interaction between two biological systems, electron clouds, feels like to two nervous systems that evolved to interpret it that way. None of this is less real because of the physics. All of it is more real, more interesting, more profound. And there's one more thing I want to say, the most important thing. It's in 50 years of physics. The fact that has surprised me most is not how strange reality is at the quantum level. I got used to that. You get used to it. And the fact that has surprised me most is how far the strangeness propagates upward. You'd expect the quantum weirdness to stay small and to be relevant only for electrons and quarks and particle accelerators. And for most practical purposes, that's true. You don't need quantum mechanics to build a bridge or drive a car. But the fact that you've never touched anything that's quantum mechanics operating at the scale of your hand on a table. And the fact that every sensation you've ever had is your brain's interpretation of electromagnetic signals rather than direct experience of raw reality. And that's quantum mechanics operating at the scale of your nervous system and your consciousness. The quantum world is not just down there in the particles, it's up here in your experience. It shapes every moment of your life, every sensation, every perception. You are, in the most literal physical sense, a quantum system experiencing other quantum systems through the medium of the forces between you. The touch you feel is real, and the physics behind it is real. And the gap between them, the gap between the experience and the underlying reality, that gap is where everything interesting lives. And that gap is where consciousness lives. That gap is where love lives. That gap is where the entire human experience of being in the world lives. And it's built on electromagnetic repulsion between electron clouds. I find that magnificent. The universe arranged itself so that quantum fields could feel each other, not touch each other, and never touch but feel. Through force, through repulsion, through the remarkable machinery of nervous systems that turn physics into experience. And that's what's happening. Every time you reach out and hold something, you reach, the forces respond. Your brain constructs the sensation of solidity from the response of the forces. And somewhere in that construction, in that translation from physics to experience, something happened that physics alone could not have predicted. You felt something, and the universe felt something through you. And you called it touch. You have never touched anything in your life. And somehow, despite that, you have felt everything that matters. And go put your hand on something. Feel the pressure, the texture, the warmth, or the cold. And remember that what you're feeling is not the thing itself. It's the universe's way of telling you the thing is there. The signal is real, the experience is real, the connection is real, the contact was always an illusion. And that illusion has been the whole of your life. That's what physics says. And after 50 years of listening to physics, I've learned one thing above all else. Physics is almost always right. And the truth it's pointing to is almost always stranger and more beautiful than anything we imagined. Thank you for listening. Now go touch something. For the first time, understanding what that really means.